Have you ever heard of the Grand Canyon Skull Cliff? By day, it's almost a joke, this rock formation that vaguely resembles a skull. But when the sun goes down, it transforms. The eye sockets seem to stare right through you, and if you look for too long, you might feel the rock itself breathe. Locals whisper about people disappearing on trails that aren't on any map, their calls for help echoing from inside the stone. We went looking for answers, not for ghost stories. We set up our gear, checked our ropes, and followed every safety rule. But then things got weird. The radio started echoing our words before we even spoke them. Our photos showed us smiling moments before we actually did, and then a whisper from the cliff face calling our names, daring us to step closer. I swore the rock had blinked. I'm not the kind of person who sees faces in clouds and cries about signs, but that morning, as the first light slid across the east rim of the Grand Canyon, the cliff opposite me looked like a giant skull. 2 round hollows for eyes, a narrow crack for a nose, a shadowed oval below that could have been a mouth. It was unmistakable. I blinked, and the right eye darkened and then flashed again, like someone deep inside had turned their head. I'd gone out alone before sunrise to a spot I found the day before, a narrow spit of rock that stuck out past a knot of juniper. I was there to take photos. My tent and my 2 friends, Leah and Owen, were just behind me on a flat patch near an old cairn, well off the main trail. I'd been bragging that my shots from this trip would go viral. I had also joked, the night before, that the cliff looked like a skull, and we were camping right in its grin. I wish I had not said that. I wish I had never said anything at all. The wind was steady and thin, like it had been filtered through teeth. Ravens hopped along the rim, their black forms stark against the rising sun. The canyon smelled like dust and pine, and something sour, something vaguely metallic whenever the wind shifted. I lifted my camera lens and zoomed into the eye sockets of the skull. The right one was deeper, a perfectly round chamber set into the red wall, and it was ringed with pale mineral stains, like grotesque eyelashes. The left was a smaller, more collapsed cave with a long black drip staining the rock down its cheek. "Do you see that?" I called out, jumping as I realized Owen had crept up without me noticing. He was a quiet guy and loved to scare me. He just laughed under his breath, stepping up beside me. "It looks like it wants to swallow us," he said, his voice low. "Leah's gonna hate this." "She hates everything we like," I said. But I was smiling. I kept the camera up, hands steady, trying to get the perfect shot. Just then, the right eye dimmed and brightened again. Not a blink, I told myself. Probably a bird wheeling past the opening, or just a trick of the sun hitting the rock. "Don't say it blinked," Owen said, his eyes fixed on my face. "Because your face says it blinked." "I'm not saying that," I said, trying to sound casual. "But it kind of blinked." We both laughed, way too loud, like a couple of kids laughing at a funeral to chase the fear away. And that's when the wind just stopped. In the sudden, dead silence, we both heard my name. It came from the hollow. It came from inside the skull. And it was my voice. "Jesse," it said, soft like I was whispering from a nearby room. "Jesse, come here." We froze. Owen's smile died on his mouth. He turned his head like a dog hearing a word it knows. He looked at me, his eyes wide. I shook my head, slow, my tongue feeling thick and stuck to the roof of my mouth. "Leah," Owen said, his voice too fast, too loud, desperate to fill the unnatural silence. "Leah's screwing with us. Where is she?" "She's asleep," I said, but my chest was beating a frantic drum against my ribs. I raised the camera again, my hands shaking now. The right eye of the skull seemed bigger somehow, not like it had actually grown, more like the entire canyon had subtly rearranged itself just to put it closer to me. "Jesse," my own voice said again from inside the rock. "Come see." "I did not say that," I whispered, horrified. "I know," Owen said. He was already backing up toward the camp. We should go wake her. We moved quickly, our feet careful on the loose rock, the angle of the switchback already feeling treacherous. Our camp was just behind a cluster of scrubby bushes. As we came into view, Leah sat bolt upright in her sleeping bag. She had heard it, I could tell. She looked like she'd been squeezing her eyes shut for too long. She was pale, and there was grit on her face. "You heard it too," she said, her voice shaking. "It said my name first." We stood there like three kids caught sneaking out, the morning sun now feeling accusatory. The skull on the cliff face was brighter, clearer, and somehow more obvious. It wasn't just a rock formation. Those hollows were not random. Whatever had carved this canyon had left a sick joke here, and whatever lived inside that joke knew we were watching. Owen, ever the rational one, tried to play it down. He said maybe it was someone inside the cave calling to us. A lost hiker. A kid playing a prank. He said it was our duty to check. He said he would go first. Leah grabbed his arm, her knuckles white. "No," she told him, her voice firm. "Don't you dare." And then, I surprised myself. "I'll go with him," I said. The words just came out. We left Leah at the camp with the emergency whistle and the first aid kit. We took the rope and our headlamps. We started following a faint, barely there path that skirted the rim, leading toward the big hollow eye. The drop beside us was a sheer red throat, disappearing into shadow. Our boots sent little chips of stone clinking down into the dry air. The ravens glided on the thermals, watching us. The closer we got, the more the cave looked like a real eye. Not just a hole in the rock. There were lighter veins running through the stone around it, like tiny capillaries, and the wind coming from the opening. It tasted wrong. It had a bitter metallic edge, like putting a battery on your tongue. "Hello?" Owen shouted toward the darkness. "Is anyone in there?" A perfect echo came back instantly, but it wasn't Owen's voice. It was mine. "Are you in there?" My voice called back, but from deeper inside. It was softer, and it sounded wet, like the words had been pulled through a mouthful of water. "Don't go!" Leah yelled from the direction of our camp, but it was too late. I had already stepped onto the narrow ledge that led to the opening. The ledge was a foot wide at best, and it tilted downward. It was covered in a thick layer of fine, red dust, which meant no one used it much. But there were marks in the dust. Little arcs, like someone had recently dragged their fingers along the wall for balance. I don't know why, but I put my hand over one of those marks. The dust was cold. "Jesse?" my voice said from inside the cave, but this time it was right next to my ear. "Help me." I didn't think. I just went in. I had the headlamp and the rope. Owen was right behind me, one hand clutching my pack. The cave was round and smooth for the first 10 feet, like a throat, like we were being swallowed. The light from my headlamp made the walls shine like old, yellowed teeth. And then I saw the scratches. Real ones, not the natural grooves of water erosion. They looked like someone had been counting days in there. 5 lines, a dash, 5 lines, a dash, over and over. Then, deeper in, the counting stopped. The lines turned to circles scratched into the rock again and again all the way around the tunnel. Circles like eyes. "Do you smell that?" Owen whispered, his voice tight. "I do," I said. It smelled like old skin, like a wet animal that had been left in the sun to rot. It was stronger when the wind died, and that made no sense at all. "Jesse," my own voice said just ahead. "It's me. I'm stuck." I raised the beam of my headlamp. The floor dipped and then rose again. A thin lip of rock crested like a wave, and beyond it, the cave opened into a low, wide chamber. Something moved in there, quick and careful. The beam washed over the ground and caught on bones. Not fresh. Long, curved human bones. Some had little holes bored through them. Bracelets made out of what looked like rib bones lay in a pile, hung on a jutting stone like twisted decorations. Owen squeezed my shoulder so hard I thought he might break it. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. The scratching on the wall was louder here. Not the sound of someone carving with a rock. It was the sound of fingernails on stone. "Don't step," my voice whispered, softer now, almost singing. "Don't step." I froze, my boot hovering inches above that rocky lip. My light trembled, drawing a jittery pattern over the walls. The scratched circles seemed to spin. The cave itself felt like it was breathing with us. I could hear Owen's heart pounding, and I swear, I could hear my own voice smiling in the dark. The thing in the chamber moved again, and then it slowly raised its head into the beam of my light. For a split second, I saw my own face where its face should have been. Pale and stretched, with my own smile pulled too wide and wrong, as if it had learned to wear my skin like a mask. "Jesse," it said, and it was my voice exactly, and it was close enough to touch. I instinctively jerked the light up and the face leaned closer. It was smooth and unnatural, like wet paper pressed over a skull. A cold breath touched my cheek. It didn't smell like a person. It smelled of damp earth, old skin, and that rusty scent, stronger now. Owen yanked on my pack, trying to pull me back. The rock under my boots crumbled a little. The thing blinked with my eyes, and my heart went wild because I saw my own expression move across its features. It wasn't a reflection. It was alive. "Jesse," it said again softly, intimately, like we were old friends. "Help me." It lifted a hand. The fingers were all wrong. Too many of them, thin and pale. Each one ended not in a nail, but in a hard, round tip, like a tiny polished pebble. It reached for me, and I felt one of those tips pressed gently under my left eye, as if it was searching for something. The touch burned with an impossible cold. I flinched, my light shaking across the walls. The ancient circles scratched into the stone all around us caught the light, and for a split second, they didn't look like scratches. They looked slick, wet. They looked like they were watching us. "Back," Owen hissed, trying to haul me away from the edge. But the thing moved with us, smooth and silent, like a spider under a sheet. It never let its face leave my light. My own mouth, on its face, made a small, soft laugh. A laugh I recognized from happier times. Hearing it now, from that thing, made my skin crawl. "Do not step," my own voice said from the darkness ahead. The tone was tender, like a parent warning a child. "Do not step there." I looked down. My foot was dangling over an abyss I hadn't even seen. The ledge we were on was a brittle shell. The floor beyond was just a thin crust over a deep, dark drop. As the wind blew through the cave, the crust trembled like fabric. When I shifted my weight, it spiderwebbed with cracks. Owen pulled harder. My boot slipped and punched right through the crust. A blast of cold air rushed up from the darkness below, like a sigh from a buried mouth. In that instant, the thing's hand snapped for my face. Those round, hard fingertips scraped my skin. A line of fire shot across my cheek. "Leah," it said. But this time it was Leah's voice. Perfect. It had that little rasp she has when she first wakes up. "Come here, it is safe." I don't know if Leah heard it from the mouth of the cave, but I heard her stumble on loose rock behind us. She called our names, sharp and fast with panic. The thing twitched at the sound. For the first time, it looked away from me. And when it turned its head, I saw the seams. I saw my own skin stretched tight over something else, held in place by tiny stitches of grit. Underneath, the color was wrong, a sickly pale, like flesh that has never seen the sun. I shoved my headlamp right into its face. It didn't scream. It made a soft, chittering sound like pebbles rolling in a tin can. The light made it shrink back. It put up a hand to shield its face like a child, and I saw that the pads of its fingers had circles on them. Little whorls, like fingerprints. but each one was a dark pupil that constricted in the bright glare. "Back," Owen said again, his voice tight. "Now." We shuffled sideways, away from the fragile crust, our heels searching for solid ground. The thing just watched us from the edge, almost playful, brushing its strange fingertips along the stone. The wind gusted again, bringing that sour battery taste and a new sound, like fingernails dragging slowly over rock. It wasn't just coming from in front of us. It was coming from below, from above, from the watching circles all around us. We scrambled out of that cave and burst onto the ledge. The bright morning sun felt like being pulled from deep water after nearly drowning. Leah was there, pale, her face streaked with tears. She put her hands on my chest, then on Owen's shoulders, as if she needed to physically confirm we were real and solid. "It knows our names," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It said mine the way my grandmother used to. It knew." "Move," Owen said, his eyes fixed forward. He didn't look back. We moved along the ledge, first slowly, then faster, until we were practically running, our hands scraping against the rough rock wall. I didn't dare look back until we were under the relative safety of an old juniper tree. When I did, I saw the skull-shaped rock formation that gave the cliff its name. One of its eyes went dark, then bright again, as if something inside had turned away, and then faced us once more. We tore our camp down with frantic, clumsy hands. We just had to get away. Leah's emergency whistle was still around her neck, and she kept pressing it without making a sound, a repetitive, nervous habit. My camera felt heavy on my chest. I hadn't noticed until then, but the lens cap was gone. The glass was scuffed and there was a faint smear across it, like a wet mouth had pressed against it and pulled away. We didn't talk much on the way out. We walked fast, our pace bordering on reckless on the steep switchbacks. At one turn, I heard my own voice call my name from the canyon below. It was the way you hear yourself in a nightmare, small and too close to your ear. Leah squeezed my hand so hard my rings dug into my skin. I had to say her name out loud, just to anchor my own voice to make sure it was still mine. We made it to the car by early afternoon. The vast blue sky seemed indifferent. The canyon lay behind us like a sleeping animal. We drove to a cheap motel, none of us wanting to be on the road after dark. In the room, I washed my face. The cold burn under my eye flared up. In the mirror, I saw a thin crescent-shaped mark, too neat for a scratch. It looked like someone had traced a curve with a blade and then pressed the skin back down. When I touched it, I felt a strange resistance from underneath, a pressure like a thumb pushing back from the other side. Later, we sat on the beds eating stale chips. I played back the audio from my camera. You can hear the wind, the ravens. You can hear me laughing with Owen before we went in. Then, in the cave, you can hear my voice saying, "Do not step." It's me. Same breath, same intonation. But I'm also talking over myself at the same time. Two versions of my voice, saying different things. One telling me to go, one telling me to stop. They overlap, tangled together. I don't know which one is real. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those circles opening in the dark, watching me. Leah fell asleep with the light on. Owen lay perfectly still, his eyes closed. Around 3 in the morning, something whispered my name. It came from inside the motel wall right by my head. I held my breath. It held its breath with me. When I exhaled, it exhaled too. A soft, wet sound that I knew was mine. In the morning, Owen smiled at me, and it was him. His normal, crooked smile. He asked if I was okay. He said it in my voice, just for a second. When he said my name, I heard it twice. Once from his mouth and once from inside my own head, from a place that felt round and smooth and deep. I pretend I'm okay now. I go to work. I sleep with the light on. Every time I look in the mirror, I check. I make sure I blink when I think I blink. But sometimes, late at night, I see myself already smiling before my mouth even moves. Like a face inside my own is always 1 second ahead, just waiting. I haven't gone back to Skull Cliff. I don't have to. It's patient. It knows my name. And sometimes it still wears it. Have you ever heard a rope laugh? If you haven't, you'll probably think I'm making this up. Honestly, I used to think the same thing about the stories other climbers told. You know how it is. Hikers add their own embellishments, and soon a simple gust of wind becomes a whisper from a ghost. But the first time I heard it up on the rim by a place we call Skull Cliff, it was unmistakable. A small, breathy chuckle right behind me, but nobody was there. It started light, almost like someone trying to smother a laugh in their sleeve. The sound seemed to slide over the rock right into my ear and then sink into the climbing cord in my hand. At the time, I was in my 4th season helping a volunteer crew. We did trail work and simple rigging jobs near the canyon, checking fixed lines, retiring bad anchors, and sometimes carrying people out when their luck ran out. My knots are good. I'm careful. I have to be. That morning, it was just me and my friend Mara. We were planning a practice rappel on a clean rock face near Skull Cliff. It is a formation that looks just like its name. 2 round hollows for eyes and a deeper cut for a mouth. We'd laughed off the old stories about a laughing line. It's just wind, we told each other. Wind makes strange music in stone and nylon. We got to the edge early. The air was sharp and crisp. The smell of juniper sap was sweet and dry. Ravens circled like black ink spots against the pale sky. Below us, the canyon fell away into deep reds and long shadows, with a pale smear in the rock that looked unnervingly like skin. Right there at the rim, half hidden under some gritty weeds, we found it. A rope. It ran over the lip of the cliff and disappeared down into what would be the right eye of the skull. The rope was sun-bleached to the color of old bone. Its outer sheath was stiff and fuzzy in places, like old hair. It was tied to a rusted ring, hammered into a seam at a really bad angle. Someone had used a knot I didn't recognize and certainly didn't like. They had just left it there to die. "Cut it," Mara said. She has this incredible calm about all the right things. She handed me her knife. As I reached out and touched the rope with 2 fingers to lift it, it happened again. That same small, held-in laugh. It wasn't the wind in the ring. It wasn't the squeal of nylon on metal. The sound came from inside the rope's braid, a little pulse that vibrated right up my arm. "We'll rig away from it," I said, pulling my hand back. "After our practice, we'll deal with that mess." We set up our own anchor, using a massive boulder, a clean rope wrap, and a backup piece for safety. We laid a pad over the edge to protect our line. We checked each other's gear, just like we always do, simple and steady. As I leaned back to weight our line, the old rope swung just an inch and let out a sharper little "hee," like a kid teasing you from far away. I told myself it was just the rusty ring turning in the rock, but my gut wasn't buying it. "I'll go first," I said. "It's a habit of mine." Mara nodded, positioning herself where she could watch the anchor, the lip of the cliff, and me all at once. I clipped in, checked the gate of my carabiner with my thumb, and felt my descender kiss the rope. That moment of leaning back over the edge always wakes you up. The world becomes a hinge, and you are the pin holding it together. The cool canyon air rushed against my face. My own breathing sounded loud inside my helmet, like a small, panicked animal. I moved down slowly, my boots kicking up little waves of dust from the rock face. The old rope hung to my left at first. Then, as I passed a small bulge in the rock, it drifted across my path. As it slid over my shoulder, the sheath brushed against my skin right through my shirt. It tickled like hair. It had a strange smell, like old pennies and rain hitting a hot road. As it rubbed against the ring above me, it let out a long, slow chuckle, soft and wet at the end, as if it was swallowing the sound. "Do you hear that?" I called up to Mara. "It's wind in the hardware," she called back, but her voice sounded uncertain, like she was trying to convince herself. I rappelled down another 10 feet. Everything was quiet except for my own sounds, the click and buzz of the device as the rope fed through. But then the hum changed. It deepened into a purr that had nothing to do with my hands controlling the descent. The vibration moved through my gloves, into my bones. And under that purr, thin as a thread under fabric, a voice emerged. It said my name. It said it just like my mother used to when I was a kid and in big trouble. The voice didn't come from above or below. It came from the rope, right where it touched my body. "You good?" Mara called down, her voice tight. "All good," I lied. I was aiming for a small ledge to rest on, barely a shelf, just the width of my boot. The right eye of the skull formation yawned open right beside me. It wasn't just a hole, it was a round chamber that seemed to swallow the light. The old rope slipped straight into it like a string being pulled through the eye of a needle. There was no sway, no swing. It was being held by something I couldn't see. Suddenly, my own line went tight in a way I didn't ask for. But the pull wasn't from above. It was from below, as if unseen hands had taken hold and were drawing me down, polite but firm. I looked up. Mara hadn't moved. Her hand was on our rope, but I could see a touch of slack in it. "I'm not taking," she yelled, confirming my fear. Just then, the old rope pressed a loop against the side of my face. It felt warm in a way I did not like the inside of a mouth. It rubbed against my ear and let out a tiny he that vibrated inside my skull. Then, the voice spoke again, right through the fibers, small and precise, like a breath between teeth. It said, "Lean back more." Before I could even think, I did it. My heels slipped on the gritty ledge. Dust fell down my neck, inside my shirt. I managed to set my boot back on the ledge, which crumbled a little but held. I looked into the eye of the skull, and the darkness inside pulsed once like a chest taking a breath. The old rope wasn't hanging free anymore. It was tensed up, pulled taut, as if it had been tied off somewhere deep inside that I couldn't see. The ring up top turned a fraction of an inch without any wind. It clicked, a sound like a tongue against teeth. "Mara," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "It's moving on its own." "It shouldn't be," she said. Her voice sounded so far away now, stretched thin by the distance and the stone. I could feel her pulse in our rope like a distant heartbeat. But under it, a second beat rose up through my descender, quick and excited. It felt like laughter running through the nylon fibers. I reached for the small loop on my harness, the one that would let me ascend to climb back up. But that's when the old rope flicked my main carabiner, like a little finger tapping it. It tapped once, twice, and on the third tap, the gate slid open for just a blink. In that instant, it laid a loop of itself right into my metal carabiner. The gate snapped shut on its own. The loop tightened, and I felt it settle onto my belay loop like a hand closing its grip around me. I felt my body turn toward the eye, without me meaning to. My own line went light, like a leash going slack. Two different pulls now lived in my body. One from the world I knew from Mara above, the other from the dark place in the rock. The laughing sound came up through both ropes and got into my teeth, making them ring. I tried desperately to snap the gate back open, but my own weight was now a lock I couldn't pick. "Unclip it," Mara yelled, her voice no longer calm. "I can't," I screamed back. She said my name then, flat and cold. "Do not let it bring you to the opening." I told her I wouldn't, and I lied again. I was already half-turned. From deep inside the blackness, I heard the sound of rope sliding fast, as if someone was pulling in slack to tie a fresh knot. It made a happy little sound, a private joke, just below my feet. The loop bit down hard and I felt my center of gravity go completely weightless as the old rope tugged me off the ledge and pulled me into the eye. My boots scraped uselessly against the rock dust. My hips swung out and I kissed the rock face with my teeth. The laugh that seemed to be woven into the fibers of the rope rose from a breathy whisper to a low chuckle, like someone who's just pulled off a neat little trick and is immensely pleased with themselves. The inside of the cave took me the way a throat takes a swallow. Cold air rushed up to meet my face as if the hole itself exhaled as I dropped. From the rim I could hear Mara yell my name. Our rope, our real rope, lifted a fraction of an inch, but the tug from below was patient, steady. It was like hands under a blanket moving me exactly where they wanted me to go. The old rope slid over my chest and wrapped around me once, then twice, as gentle as a sash. Each pass warmed up instantly, like skin that had just been pressed against another. It stroked my ear and the laugh came right into me, vibrating through my bones. It sounded like me when I'm nervous and trying to crack a joke. Then it spoke. It said, "Easy now," in my own voice. The tone was kind, but it was all wrong. The words vibrated in the rope's sheath like a whisper humming inside a cup. My training kicked in. I reached for my knife. The handle found my palm like it always does, a familiar comfort. The blade clicked open with a tiny, sharp hiccup of sound. The old rope shifted to meet it, as if it could see perfectly in the pitch-black darkness. It pressed its side against the flat of the blade and guided it down toward my belay loop. It was the same motion my father used to use, guiding my hands when I was just a small kid, learning to tie a bowline. I had a sudden, vivid flash of my father's garage, the smell of oiled bicycle chains, and strong coffee. His finger tapping my knuckles, telling me to trust the rope because a clean knot is a kind of prayer. The old rope whispered, "Trust me," in his voice, and I almost cried right there, suspended in the dark. My father has been gone for 6 years. I jerked my hand away, horrified, and slashed at the loop that had slipped itself into my carabiner. The blade sank maybe 1/8 of an inch and then dragged, like I'd hit gristle. A fine black dust puffed off the cut and got in my nose. It tasted like pennies and rain. The loop tightened with a quick, excited twitch. It made a light chittering sound, like little stones rolling around in a tin can. "Not there," it said softly, and with a careful nudge, it moved my knife toward my own waist belt, as if it wanted me to cut myself free of my safety line, to give it all my weight. My eyes were starting to adjust to the dark. I could see more now. The cave was a round room, like a stomach. In the center, the floor had collapsed long ago, creating a dip. The old rope went down into that dip and then came back up out of it at all these different angles, as if it was traveling into something below, and then feeding itself out again. And there were other lines too. Old slings, frayed cords, broken harness straps, all braided together into these slow, careful shapes. Carabiners glittered in the faint light like teeth. I saw a chalk bag lying on a rock, and on it was a handprint that didn't match any hand I'd ever seen. It had way too many fingers. Mara's voice came down from above, thin and tight. She was yelling at me to clip the rescue loop she was dropping. A new line swung into view, clean and white, and my stomach leaped with a sudden surge of hope. But the old rope snaked across my chest and lifted its end to greet the clean line like an old friend. It looped once, slid, and tied a neat knot around it with a little, satisfied sigh. The new line, my rescue line, stopped moving. It felt owned. Above me, the metal ring at the rim of the cave turned a tiny fraction with a dry click. The laugh rose up through both lines now, as if it had braided them together from the inside. "On belay," a voice said. Not from the rim, not from my own throat. It came from the old rope right by my ear. The tone was one I knew. It was a guy I had trained with 2 summers ago, the bored, casual way he would say it. That's when I started to shake. I felt like I was listening to a choir made of dead people's breath. I did something I have told every single person I've ever trained never to do. I locked my belay device off with a quick mule knot, and I took one hand completely off the metal. I slammed my shoulder into the rock wall and hooked my boot on a little nub to hold myself in place. I used my free hand to reach for the loop that was biting into my carabiner. The old rope let me touch it. It even softened for me, the way a branch bends for a bird. I think it wanted me to feed myself deeper into its trap, to be tidy. I took the slack it offered and I fed it right back at itself as fast as I could. Once around my boot, twice, twisting, turning, building a little snare like I was trying to rope a snake. The laugh changed. It got tight and small like a breath being held. I yanked. The loop jumped half an inch. It fought back, but it was a soft, polite fight. It didn't want to tear, it wanted to undo itself. I shoved my knife blade flat under the twist I'd made and sawed. The black dust puffed out again. The sheath split on one side with a faint sigh, and underneath it, a pale inner core flexed like a muscle. The sound that came out of it wasn't a scream, and it wasn't a laugh. It was both at once, a happy, pained sound that raised every hair on my arms. The weight shifted. Mara felt it instantly. Our line went heavy, honest and simple again. She hauled. I slid up a foot, then another, my own rope making clean, normal sounds against the rock. The old rope flailed without really moving, looping itself back through itself, the way a person might flail in a dream where your arms make no splash. It reached for me, brushed my face and said, "Wait," in my own voice, so sweet and pleading that I almost stopped. But I did not stop. My boot knocked a pile of old gear. A camera fell and busted open, its film spilling out and curling like shed skin. A ring rolled slowly, stopped right at the edge of the central dip, and then just kept on rolling as if the rock itself tilted just for it, guiding it down into the dark. The cave breathed once, a deep, slow breath, and cold air washed past me, like a sigh of disappointment. The old rope just lay there, looped and neat. It didn't reach for me again. It just watched if a rope can watch. The circular patterns in the fibers seemed to tighten and loosen, like pupils dilating. When my head came up over the lip of the cave, my throat made a sound I didn't plan. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly let go. Mara grabbed my harness with both hands and we both just collapsed in the dust, tangled up and shaking. We broke down the climbing system like we were tearing a spiderweb off our faces. Mara tried to pull the old metal ring from the rim with a crowbar. It didn't budge. It just turned enough to look at us if a ring can look. The old rope now sat a few inches over the edge, not moving but not dead either. It made a soft sound, like a child telling a joke under their breath. We should have cut it then, but neither of us could bring ourselves to put the blade to it again. I don't know if it was fear, or if some of its calm had already gotten inside us. We didn't speak much on the hike out. We both kept our hands open, fingers splayed, as if our palms were burned. At the car, my seatbelt stuck for a second, like it had glued itself to the pillar. When it finally slid free, it made this tiny little "he" sound in the metal as it rebounded. I drove with two hands on the wheel and kept checking the rearview mirror for a line that wasn't there. I still do this work. A life has to go on in some shape. I retired my harness and the rope I used that day. I hung them in the shed inside a sealed bin and snapped the lid shut. Sometimes at night I hear something inside that bin turn over once, slowly, like a coil settling. My shoelaces have started to knot themselves into small, neat hitches when I'm not looking. My shower curtain tie twisted itself into a pretty little noose without my hands ever touching it. My cat batted at it once, hissed, and now refuses to go back in the bathroom. Last week, I woke up with a thin, bruised ring around my waist, right where a harness sits, even though I haven't worn one since that day. When I pressed the skin, I felt something springy under there like a buried rubber band. When I pulled my hand away, the skin moved a fraction of a second behind my touch, as if a loop inside me was just catching up. I told myself it was just a trick of my nerves. Then I went to put on my pack for an easy walk near my house. and the sternum strap slipped through the buckle and caught all by itself in a clean half-hitch. It tightened with a polite little tug. I keep hearing that breathy chuckle in places where cords live. The vacuum cleaner hose, the pull chain for the lamp, the drawstring on my hoodie. It's never loud. It's always delighted, like it knows a secret about me. Sometimes, when I'm tying something simple like a garbage bag, my hands move ahead of my thoughts and they make a knot I didn't intend to make. I'll look down and it's perfect, tidy. It feels like a prayer. And every time from inside the quiet of my house, right by my ear, a small voice says, "On belay," in my father's voice. I feel a gentle tug from a place that isn't in the room, and I tell myself I will not lean back. I tell myself that, and sometimes right after I hear myself laugh. There's a warning we don't put on the map. Sometimes after dark the canyon adds steps you didn't bring. You look down at a slope you know by heart, and suddenly there are extra cuts in the rock. Neat little turns that lead you right off the face and into places we don't patrol. I'm a backcountry ranger. My job is to walk the same old lines until they live in my feet, until I know every rock and every twist. I answer bad luck with tape, rope, and a calm voice on the radio. And I learned about those extra steps the hard way out near Skull Cliff. Late in the season, the light was already fading when I got a call about a solo hiker. He was overdue near the East Rim. He'd told a friend he wanted a closer look at that rock formation that looks like a skull. Sent a picture and then nothing. The tower handed it to me because I was already out, and, well, I have a habit of saying yes. When I left the truck, the rim smelled like dust and juniper sap. A few ravens followed me for a while, then went silent, almost like they didn't want to be involved in what was coming. The wind carried that faint metallic taste you get before a storm, that little hint of pennies even though the sky above was clear and flat. I walked fast. Not running, that's stupid out here. I focused on the small things I could control. Every few turns I tucked a piece of reflective tape onto a cairn, a little breadcrumb trail for the light. I touched the trail like I was weaving a braid, making it my own as I went. Up ahead and a little below was Skull Cliff. Its face is hollowed out in a way that your brain just finds a face whether you want it to or not. Two empty sockets for eyes, one deeper than the other. A thin crack where a nose might be, and a deep shadow for a mouth if stone had a mouth. I've camped out there. I've watched the sunrise hit that face and laughed about it with friends. But I've also heard the other rangers tell the story. The one about a man named Ellis. He vanished on a night not so different from this one. He'd said on the radio that the trail kept turning under him, that there were more switchbacks every time he blinked. We don't put that on paper. Officially, we say he got lost and fell. We say it kindly. We don't say more. My radio hissed. And then it spoke in my own voice. It said my call sign, then my name. Then it just clicked out. The sound was flat, empty, like a recording from a phone that's been left out in the sun too long. I froze. I stopped and just listened to my own breath, counting it in and out. Then I keyed the mic. "Tower copy," I said. "Say again." Only wind answered. Then a whisper of my voice again, this time a half sentence I didn't remember ever saying. "Hold the turn," it said. "Don't cut." I didn't key the mic again. I told myself I'd picked up some old radio traffic bouncing off a canyon wall. I've heard stranger things out here. The switchbacks leading down into the side canyon were simple in the daylight, the path narrow but honest. At dusk, they went thin as a pencil line, and then halfway down I saw them. Extra cuts in the slope, paths that I didn't know. They were neat, like someone had chiseled them fresh that very afternoon. The dust on them was fine and completely unmarked, like a clean sheet on a bed. The steps were a little too close together like a child makes when they're playing around. I told myself miners make their own paths. That old cruise did work out here, the maps forgot. I stuck to the steps I knew, the trail I trusted. I passed a small hat brimmed down in the brush. It was sun-bleached to the color of bone. The inside band had a salt ring and a name written in faded pen. It looked like Ellis to me, but it could have been any name. I didn't pick it up. A little further down, I found prints that didn't match mine. They were the same boot make I wear, same tread, same wear on the heel. But the stride was all wrong. The steps were pinched, turning too tight, as if the person who made them wanted to touch every single stone on the way down. They led directly into those fresh-cut turns, the ones that weren't on my map. The dust held the prints like a perfect cast. They looked wet around the edges, like something had bled into the grains and then dried. "Subject, call out," I said. Not a shout, just a calm voice, the way you do when you're trying not to spook a lost kid. "This is Ranger Service, I'm here to help." Something answered me from the near darkness below. The sound didn't echo right, it just hung in the air. "Here," it said in a voice I almost knew. It had my breath in it, the way I hit the H on that word when I'm tired. It sounded relieved but careful, like someone trying not to cry on the radio. I went down 2 more turns. The canyon walls around me narrowed. The air got colder, like I'd just stuck my head in a refrigerator. Below me I saw reflective strips on a cairn, tucked under a stone just the way I tucked them. I hadn't been there yet, but there it was. My tape, my fold, my little signature crease so the light catches just right. I reached out and touched it. It felt warm, like someone's hand had just been there. I had to hear a normal sound. I grabbed my radio. "Tower," I said into the mic. I have a voice response, continuing down. Static. And then, plain as day, my own voice replied, "Copy." I snatched my thumb off the button, dropping my hand like I'd been burned. The reply had come from my radio speaker and from the slope below me at the exact same time. I rounded the next turn and I saw him. A man in a ranger jacket, maybe 40 feet down, standing with his hand on a rock like he was waiting. He had the posture of a seasoned pro, someone who's been doing this long enough to know how to save his knees. He wasn't looking at me, not at first. He was staring into the blackness of the right eye of Skull Cliff, as if he was counting something inside it. He had a radio on his chest and a whistle on a cord at his shoulder. He lifted a hand and gave me the slow down signal. Every movement he made was careful, quiet, and bone-tired. "Hold the turn," he said, without looking up. "Don't cut, the tread is thin." I opened my mouth to ask his name, but I stopped. He turned his head, and I saw the badge on his jacket. It was pinned on crooked, held in place by a thorn. The metal caught my headlamp's beam and I read the name engraved on it. It was my name. Neat and clean. He tilted his face up just another inch, just enough to look at me from under the brim of his hat. He had my mouth too, only it was pale, and it was a half-second ahead of mine, already forming the word he was about to make me say. I opened my lips to ask who he was. He shaped the same question first, like a puppet master showing a puppet what to do. The word left his mouth and then mine. It felt like chewing someone else's food. "Hold the turn," he said, and I mouthed it with him, a breath late. "Do not cut. Keep your hip to the wall." He lifted his hand, palm down, and made a little settle motion, the kind you make for a horse. I didn't want to obey him. I obeyed anyway. The slope to my right looked smooth and kind. The extra cuts in the trail were tidy and close, the way a child makes careful steps in wet sand and then laughs. The dust on them was fine and soft like sifted flour, but the steps I knew the real trail were hard and mean. They had chips where boots bite and a darker line where countless souls burnished the rock. The man who had my mouth turned his head back toward the right eye of Skull Cliff. He smelled like cold stone and old sweat. His jacket was my jacket, right down to the wear marks on the elbows. His badge was pinned with a thorn through the clasp. The thorn was green at the tip, sticky with sap. He pressed the badge with 2 fingers like he was keeping it from slipping, and the metal was my name. "Do not look at the new ones," he said. "They are not for you. They look like a kind of help. They are not help. My radio hissed, and my own voice came through it saying, "Copy." The same word echoed from the slope below at the same time, as if the stones themselves had a speaker. I swallowed and tasted pennies. My teeth felt wrong in my gums, like I hadn't grown them myself. We moved together, but I wasn't with him. He was always one turn down the trail and half a breath ahead of me. He set his hand on a rock and I put mine there after. The stone was warm where his palm had been. The neat little fresh cuts in the path kept trying to seduce my eyes, always just to the right, always down and right, like a water spiral in a sink. I could feel the way they wanted my weight, patient and ready. "If you step on them," he said, his voice just ahead of my own thoughts, "you will feel full for a second. Then you will be small. They fold you thin between the wall and the dust. It is good for the thing down there and empty for you." "Ellis?" I asked, and the word came out of his mouth first. "Is he below?" He breathed out, a sigh that sounded like mine. "He is called below, yes," he said. "You will hear him. He sounds like you. He will sound more like you the closer you go." We passed a cairn with a strip of reflective tape tucked under a stone flake. It had a little crease so it flashed both ways. It was my habit. I hadn't been there yet, but my fold was there. I touched it with one finger. It was warm, like someone had just pressed it there and stepped away quick. "Who put that there?" I said, and we both said it at once. He looked down at his hand and then up at me. He smiled without showing his teeth. He didn't look happy. "You will," he said. "If we get you out, you will come back on a different night and you will leave you notes like that, and you will mean well." Below us, from the dark mouth of the cliff's right eye, a voice called, "Here." It was a breath-for-breath copy of the way I say that word when trying not to be scared. It even had my throat catch at the end. A hat brim showed for a second in the shadow, then was gone. The smell of rain on hot dust came up, sweet and metallic. "Do not go to him," the ranger with my mouth said. "He is not where you can help him. He is where the canyon keeps what it cannot finish." We came to a place where the trail split like hair. 10 tight turns had been cut into a space that should only hold 3. They curled and made a neat little maze with a flat spot in the center, where a person could stand and turn and never leave. The dust inside those tight turns was as smooth as a plate. I kicked a line of grit across it and it slid sideways instead of downhill. "The old ones go," he said. "The new ones circle. Keep your eyes on the scuff marks you made when you were other you. Follow the scrapes, not the perfect." I did what he said. I put my boot on a mean, ugly step. The rock bit my soul. My ankle burned. It felt like truth. I looked down and saw my own boot prints laid ahead in a line that danced around the clean, fresh turns, like a person who refuses to be lured into a game. The air cooled as we dropped. It got so quiet I could hear my own saliva move. My mouth felt laid in my face. He spoke, and I chased his words. At a sharp corner, he stopped and put his hand on my wrist. His glove was thin. His fingers were mine, scars and all. There is a little half moon on my index finger where a car door bit me when I was a kid. I felt the same raised place through his glove. His grip was firm and dry. He leaned close and his lips moved just ahead of mine. "This is where I left me," he said. "This is where someone left me when I was you. If I take one more step, I belong to the turn that is not on your map." I looked down. The next cut was narrow and neat and perfect. It gleamed like a tongue in a mouth. The right eye of Skull Cliff pulsed, like a chest rising. A breath came out of it that smelled like old skin and wet coins. "How do I get out?" I said. He was already saying it. It was like trying to match a song played a hair too fast. "Back," he said. "Step the ugly, count 7, do not count 6. Do not look right when you hear yourself call. If you look, you will step where you want to, not where you need to. When you feel the urge to hurry, go slower. If the trail grows more, you be less. He let go of my wrist. I wanted him to come with me. I told him so. My mouth broke on the words even as he made them clean. I cannot, he said. Someone has to hold here. Someone held me. You will hold for someone else. Pin your badge. I looked down at my chest. The clasp on my badge was gone. It dangled, one corner catching light. I hadn't noticed. My heart stuttered. Art. He reached past me to a juniper and broke a small green thorn and pushed it through the cloth in the badge hole. It bit my finger and drew a single bead of blood that ran cold on my skin. There, he said. Now you fit. I backed up. My heel slid and then found a mean edge. I took another step and another, ugly and sure. The extra turns leaned toward me like people at a window wanting to see. I kept my hip to the wall and my eyes on the chips. I counted. 7, not 6. My breath hurt and smelled like pennies. The right eye breathed slow. The voice below called me again in my own voice, softer now, like a secret. I came up into thinner air and then into wind. A raven crossed the sky and broke it like a piece of black glass. When I topped the last turn, the world widened and the rim lay before me like a promise I hadn't dared to make. My truck was a dark block in the brush. The radio hissed and said, "Copy," from under my ribs. I turned to thank the other me. There was only the trail, plain and worn, and the clean new cuts glittering to the right like wet knives set in dust. I could not tell if anyone stood 2 turns down. The stone did not tell me. The eye across the way went dark and then bright again, as if something in there had turned its head. I still walk that slope. I place tape by habit. I tell others to hold the turn. At night in my own house, the hallway makes one more bend than it did before, a little neat corner between my bedroom and the kitchen that I did not build. The carpet there is smooth as a plate. Sometimes I catch myself turning my head a breath ahead of my thought. Sometimes I answer my own voice on a radio that is not on. On those nights, I feel my badge tug at my shirt as if a thorn is pulling me toward the stairs. And every now and then, from a dark turn that should not be there, I hear a soft call that sounds exactly like me saying here, and I have to count out loud 7, not 6, to keep from going to him. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you enjoyed it, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more tales from the places where the maps have blanks. Stay safe out there.